Jeff, we're in our fourth video on principle number one, which amazes me that we could continue to cover this because it's that's why it's principle number one.
It's very powerful.
It is, and it became the game changer in families that we worked with, and it's about our brains prioritizing fear. And I always go back to your example of being on a roller coaster, ready to go down the steep incline and not being able to do higher level math. Your brain's just not there. It's such a good analogy. So in today's video, we're going to cover 3 more points about how parents make this happen, this principle happen positively in their family.
Yeah, when we walk into families, what do we look for to tell us that they're actually using this principle in their family in a positive way? And the first one is so simple, and yet it's absent so often. Do we allow the child to feel afraid?
And it's, from a mom's standpoint, that's the last thing you want your kid to do. You want to rush in, save them, literally save them. No, I can't let this happen.
Exactly. And with traumatized children, they're always afraid, so we end up always trying to, make that trigger go away for them.
It is. So how does a parent do that first? And then why would they do it?
Well, the first thing is just to be able to label and be with the child in that fear. I see you're feeling afraid right now. It looks to me like a part of you is feeling afraid. How can I help? What's going on? And of course your goal, because the number one skill is to talk about it, your goal is to encourage them to be able to put that fear into words for you.
So what's the, I'm still stuck in my head of where some of the parents are. Say, what's the benefit? Tell me, why should I walk around and let my kid be afraid?
Because letting your child be afraid is the only way that your child's going to build the skills to handle fear. You can't teach them to ride a bike without them riding a bike and falling down. They're not going to learn how to handle fear if you don't allow the opportunities into their lives to feel fear. Jim Fay and Foster Cline in Love and Logic have always put forward that it's better for children learn these things early than later in life. One of their basic principles, and it's a good one.
Yeah, well, we've talked in other videos about the lawnmower parents, or as the one dad described himself as the bulldozer parent, mowing down everything, and then we work with a 30-some-year-old who has no ability to manage their fear and just freezes up all the time.
So that's our goal, is to simply be with them and allow them to feel the scare they're in for at least a couple minutes, if not more, before we try to help them. And then, of course, there's helping them with the fear versus immediately trying to make the trigger go away. And as we said in previous videos, as you get older, you start to encounter fears that you cannot make the trigger go away. You just have to learn to deal with the fear.
So back to the idea of, is there a point where we cut it off and don't let our kids ever be afraid about anything in particular?
I would say no.
Then we got parents who are trying to over control, and there is a limit. You just can't control everything. So now I'm letting my child be afraid. I've got this kid that's scared.
So now you can begin to look and start to evaluate how they're handling their fear. And of course, this is the basis for the vast majority of our decisions as far as how much freedom to give them. When your child comes home for the first time and says, "I want to go to a school dance," you have to be able to be comfortable that they have the skills to handle all the triggers that come from that dance. There's going to be peer pressure around, sex, drugs.
Just staying on the school property.
Staying on the school property.
Dressing is a really, the dress code.
And you have to have confidence to say yes, that they can maintain the family standards while being faced with all these triggering fears.
I like what you said about love and logic, saying let it happen early. Let it happen
Yeah,
early.
exactly.
Then by the time they are teens, you've built skills in them that you're going to have more confidence
Exactly.
in their ability to manage. So now that my child's afraid, what are some of the things that I should be doing to help my child when they're afraid?
You should be the first thing, of course, is you should be modeling how to handle your fears. You should be verbalizing them, you should be narrating them, and then you should be just basically showing the child how you handle your fears. Okay, that lets them develop skills of their own, and of course the first things you have to suggest to them are the things that work for you.
So what your first thing that you're saying to us as parents is we have to be able to say, I'm scared.
And this is what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to take a brief walk and calm my brain. That allows you, when the child is feeling scared, to comfortably say, I can see you're feeling scared right now. How about we take a walk? That always works for me. We have to have a list of our own techniques to handle fear that we can share with the children.
Yeah, I want to go back to the previous video, number 3, where we said reflect on your successes so that the children, you and the kids, will have a motto in their heads because you reflected on it, and now, so going for a walk, and then reflect, I feel better now, or not good enough, we need to go around the block another time. So we have to be able to give them some self-care skills to go with that.
So, we have to be able to sit with them in their fear. We have to be with them in it. We have to be able to calm ourselves.
That's so hard when our parent brain's hollering, this isn't fair for my child to have to go through this. This isn't fair for whatever caused my child to be afraid.
Every good parent out there has the mama bear or the papa bear strategy. Someone's scaring my child or hurting my child, I want to immediately go out and rescue. And there's a place for that, of course, in safety and such, but the goal is to be able to allow the child to develop strategies of their own for how to handle it.
So it's not about the parent hunting down the child who wronged their kid.
Now, we've heard quite a bit of that, haven't we?
We have that, and teachers. The teacher who wronged my child.
The other thing we do is, as parents, is the vast majority of the fears that our children experience. Now, our world is changing quickly, but it's still the vast number of fears that our children experience are fears we've already dealt with. So to be with them empathetically, to be able to say, "Oh yeah, I went through that. I remember this. I remember that." To the children need to know that we are capable of feeling the fear they're feeling before we can ask them to use our strategies.
Yeah, they have to be able to want to see that it works for us and that we're strong enough to manage. Too many of the kids that we have worked with in the past don't see their parent as strong enough to manage the child's emotions, so they'll keep it back. And then there's also, I know, gatekeeper wives, because they don't want to see their husband go off on some kind of tangent, so they limit the communication too.
Our ultimate goal, of course, is that children are able to face their fears and remain in their thinking brain. I even encourage parents to say, like, I'll use the dance thing, to ask them, well, what's your strategy if somebody asks you for this? How are you going to do that? How are you going to handle that? Because you want them to be in their front brain ahead of time and think about ways they're going to handle fearful situations. And I've even told children and families, when your child asks for a new freedom or a new experience, don't be afraid to say to them, well, what's your strategies for handling these fears and those fears?
I think of it as having a template in our head, and sometimes you even have to role play just to build those skills. Like you give them practice in the kitchen in cooking or building projects and stuff. You let them practice these things. You practice. I even like scruples cards. Junior scruples is a means just to have family conversation. So what happens when this happens, and so that you have discussions about these things.
Absolutely. So one of the other things I look at is I look at families who are able to talk about and model how their own fear handling strategies change over time. Because the things that work for even a child at one age don't work for another one.
Yeah, I like your example of a 2-year-old having a tantrum. It's expected it too, but when your 14-year-old throws tantrums, it's not congruent with their maturation.
Yeah. If they ask to go to the dance and you say, well, what are you going to happen if Johnny puts pressure on you to leave the facility,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, well, I'm gonna take my shoe off and clobber him in the forehead with, then you want to go, well, you might need some other strategies there.
That's right. Just like I hit my sister the other day with my shoe. I'm like, no, that's not.
Right. And of course, we model that because as running ahead of our children in the timelines,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we ourselves know that the things that we used to do to handle our fears, they don't work for us where we're at now. And I've run across a large problem in the people we work with, who, as they get older, their fear handling strategies don't change with them over time,
Mm-hmm.
and so they wind up in fearful situations as older people that they have no way of dealing with.
Yeah, their world it's gotten too small. They can't take the bike trail and go for
Right.
10 miles or something. They have to do something.
So
different.
we look for families that the strategies are age appropriate and they change.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a large list. The larger the list, the better. Because any strategy overused becomes a weakness. So we want a large list that's ever changing.
Mom's afraid all the time. She's always out running on the road, practicing her jogging and stuff. That doesn't work for families.
The next example of things we look for in successful families is I look for families who do not try to avoid triggers. It's just not even part of their family thought process. Mm-hmm. It's like, very small, frail girl says, I want to go out for the football team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the family doesn't look at her and go, no way. We're just gonna avoid that trigger altogether. You're too small. But rather they would allow her to explore options, and to have experiences and to learn for herself that this might not be something, and that's going to involve maybe some pain,
Right.
And some difficult experiences, but you don't try to avoid those experiences for the child. You help them to face them and move through.
Especially important for our kids with the trauma. I remember one girl gave us a list of 30-some things on her list that were triggers, including a box of cereal or certain steps and things. So her world would be so small if she let her world be limited to not facing any of those triggers.
Yeah.
And I remember one kid that was afraid of a cat, and how just to set the child down and safely help him be with a cat so that
it's okay to be afraid of them.
It's okay.
But you have to get strategies to handle the fear that work.
Right.
That work within the setting.
Right.
And I know the last thing that I look at is I look at families who are able to recognize and verbalize the strength of processing fears with the frontal cortex instead of the limbic brain's default of just make that trigger go away. And I look for families that can actually label it as strong versus weak. Okay, because it is a strong skill that you can deal with fear without making the trigger go away, that you can exist. I mean, we call it courage.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid sometimes we act as if it's optional.
Mm-hmm.
But life is about handling fears, and courage is not optional.
Yeah.
The more courage you have, it's not the absence of fear, it's the ability to function the way you want to with the fear trigger being present. And so I encourage families to, even telling your stories, as a parent, when I tell my stories as a parent, I can label, Oh yeah, I remember a time when I handled fear weakly. Okay, and I went into my back brain and I turned it into mad and blah blah blah. Everything blew up on me.
Uh-huh.
Versus, and that was really weak. And that versus saying I can know another time when, I adequately or strength-wise, strongly took care of my fear in such a way that I was able to do the thing that I was afraid of successfully.
And that you were a good model. I mean, at that point, you could say, I was a good model.
Yeah. It's so powerful within families, especially families with traumatized children, to recognize they never want to be weak. Especially traumatized children. They don't want to be weak in our eyes. So we can make it very clear for them, this is strong, this is weak. You might be weak now, but you'll get stronger. You might have an absence of strategies now, but you'll gain them. You'll learn them.
Because I'm going to model them for you.
I'm going to model them for you. That puts that pressure on us.
It sure enough does. So in today's video, number 4 out of principle number 1, we covered we have to allow our children to be afraid.
These are things that we look for to recognize the families are positively utilizing these principles.
And there's skills that are necessary to be able to manage fear. So we allow our children to be afraid. We're able to be with our child and offer them comfort when they are afraid, and we're not solving the problems for them. And then lastly, that the family's able to manage their fears, and this process changes over time. That actually, as we mature, we gain new skills and
lose some.
I was going to say shed, but that wasn't a good word. And then that these families are allowing fear to happen, that they're able to face the fears, and they see that as success when they face them and manage them. Strong. It's also successful in my book. Thank you all very much, and looking forward to our next video on principle number 2.